Hi, welcome to lesson 1 of the Muscle Essentials Anatomy course for trainers and athletes and basically anybody that wants to learn about the human anatomy, specifically skeletal muscles. Even if it's just a refresher, welcome and thanks for taking the time to watch. Each of these lessons is going to be about 10 minutes in length. My name is Greg. This cool looking cat skeleton sidekick of mine, his name is Sparky, and he's been around for some time. I originally took anatomy over a decade ago, and since that time we have been going around and teaching people about their bodies, how they work, how they should work if they're not working properly, and if they're not working properly, what they can do to make them work properly so they don't have to come and see a therapist like myself, because we can get pretty expensive after a while. All right, now in this course, we're going to be focusing on skeletal muscles, and we're going to be doing about 200 of them, give or take. And we're also going to be covering all sorts of other anatomy material. It can get kind of dry sometimes, so it can get kind of dry and boring, so we're going to screw around a little bit sometimes, so just bear with us. Now, when I originally took this course, there were several books that I used, and I want to give credit where credit is due for sure. Okay, I used 3 books a lot, and I also used them for reference material for this course here that I'm presenting, wherever you're watching this, on my website, YouTube, or IGTV. So, the books I used most often: Frank Netter's, okay, Atlas of Human Anatomy. This is the 4th edition. I don't know what edition they're on right now, but there is some great material in here and some great photos like this one here. This is the leg. It's a great picture of muscles of the leg, all labeled nicely. If you don't want to pick this up, you might be able to find stuff like this on the internet, but it's a fantastic book just to have at home anyway. Another one, this one gave me a lot of heartache. I tried to memorize pretty much everything in it. Principles of Anatomy and Physiology by Gerard Tortora and Brian Derrickson. This is the 12th edition. Fantastic, fantastic. Another great book just to have around the house if you ever want to refer to the anatomy or how any of your body parts work. And lastly, another one I used a lot is Clinically Oriented Anatomy, the 5th edition. This is by Keith Moore and Arthur Daly. And to show you how old this book is and how long ago I studied this stuff, this book included 2 free CD-ROMs, which are still in here. All right, I don't know. I probably, no, actually, you know what? I don't even think I ever used them. But nonetheless, I don't even know what edition they're on now, but I'm sure there's an app for it. Now, like I said, there's a lot of memory material, a lot of memory work in this stuff. And if you have trouble memorizing stuff, much like I did, I'm going to give you a few tips as we go, how to remember stuff easier and how to study this stuff. And one of the ways we did it was using cue cards like this. When I was in school, we'd write the name of the muscle on one side or bone or whatever structure it was, and we'd talk about it on the other side. And we'd pass the cue cards around like a card game. And basically, if you can play poker, you can play any game with this, and just to make it a little more enticing or a little more exciting. And whoever had the most right answers with cue cards, whoever had all the cue cards at the end, depending how you played, whoever had the most right, obviously won. Another way I remembered a lot of this stuff, studied it, is because I'm not good at just reading and remembering or listening and remembering. I'm very tactile. So this chalkboard here is one of the ones I actually used in my kitchen. And I drew every part of the human anatomy on this chalkboard, or the other one I have, at least a couple of dozen times, and labeled it. So there's just a couple of learning tips for you before we get started. As I mentioned, it is this material, a lot of reference material, is on my website, greglenko.com. Just find the menu that says Muscle Essentials and scroll down and you'll find the thing there. This again, these videos are going to be about 10 minutes each, give or take, just because I know you're busy and you don't want to have to wade through a whole bunch of material about the entire arm if we're just talking, if you just want to learn about, you know, the little pinky finger or the index finger or something like that. So these are going to be close to 10 minutes as possible. Now the curriculum. Oh, before that too, there's also going to be some quizzes on the website eventually, trivia, and I am working at getting more photos, more pics on the website, just to give you a better understanding of everything we're teaching. The curriculum now, as I mentioned, we are focused on skeletal muscles, about 200 of them. We're going to focus mainly on their names, where they are, what they do, and how to take care of them. Muscle is a form of connective tissue, so we're going to be presenting several different other types of connective tissue like cartilage and ligament and tendon. We're going to go over joints of the body, the different classifications of joints and their movements. We're going to talk about the entire skeletal system. So not just all 206 adult bones in this guy, but we're going to talk about specific specific markings on the bones, such as, if you just looked at this bone, you'd say, okay, you might say, okay, that's a humerus. But if you have knowledge of anatomy already, you could look at it and you could pinpoint certain things about this bone that other bones don't have. For instance, this is the greater tubercle, this is the lesser tubercle, this is the bicipital groove. You've got the trochlea and things like that. Okay, so we're going to go over it in detail because muscles attached to those things, they're very important structures. We're going to go over the naming of bones, because they are named for several reasons, and all this will help you understand them and give you a more thorough understanding of bones when we finally present, or of muscles, when we finally present the muscles in the end, because muscles are named for many reasons. Their shape, their size, where they're located, their action as in what they do. And we're also going to go over some directional terms. They're very important in terms of naming of bones as well. And the first lesson is today's lesson. I just realized why you have that aviator hat on and the goggles. Today's lesson is body planes. My helpers like to dress them up sometimes, and they knew I was presenting this today. And so that's why they put on the aviator goggles and hat, because of the word plane. Good one. Wrong kind of plane, but nonetheless. Yeah, maybe you do have an airplane in you because you're just bones, but nonetheless, that's a good one. All right. So we're going to learn about body planes or anatomical planes. And these are just ways of, they're just lines that separate the body. That's all they are. And we're going to do 5 of them. And they're pretty simple. Really easy memory work. If you want to write them down, that's up to you. The first one is very simple to remember. All you have to do is remember one word, sagittal. S-A-G. Okay, those are the first 3 letters. And it goes from anterior to posterior. That's all you got to do. It goes anterior to posterior, the line, and it separates the body left and right. That's all it does. And you can remember it because, remember the name, sag. Because humans, when we get older, we sag. Let's face it. We sag in the front and the back. So the line goes front to back. Sagittal plane, S-A-G. The next one is called the mid-sagittal plane. Okay? And mid, meaning middle or midline. So this one separates the body down the middle, anterior to posterior, in 2 equal halves, or the organ that we're talking about, or what have you. The third one is called the coronal plane, and this separates the body front and back, okay? Or some people like to call it the frontal plane. I don't like to use that term because it kind of gets confusing sometimes. I just like to use coronal. Frontal is correct, obviously. So coronal plane, straight through the side, okay? A lot of these planes and a lot of things in anatomy have different terms for them. As you just saw, the mid-sagittal or median plane. Did I mention the median plane? Because it's also called the median plane. Then we have this one here, the coronal or frontal plane. And the next one actually has 3 different terms for it. I generally only use the first 2. One is the horizontal plane, which is easiest to remember because the horizon is this way, and guess where this plane runs? This way. It separates the body in upper and lower parts. You can also call it the transverse plane. And if you think about traversing, it's sort of close in words, traversing across the desert or something. So transverse. And the third one, the third term for this can be kind of confusing to explain. I'm going to give it my best to explain it with a little help from Sparky maybe. But it's called the axial plane. Okay, the axial plane. And if you think of the Earth on an axle, okay, it has an axle, and the Earth kind of goes around the axle, right? This way. So it's sort of horizontal too. Well, our bodies have something called an axial skeleton. And the axial skeleton starts at your head and goes to your coccyx or coccyx. As I mentioned, there are different terminologies. There's also different ways of pronouncing things, just because some people are like that. Some people call it the tailbone. So the tailbone is the coccyx, which is also the coccyx. Okay, it's spelled C-O-C-C-Y-X, and that's why some people would call it coccyx or coccyx. So that's the axial skeleton that goes from here to the coccyx, and the rest of the body is called the appendicular skeleton, and it just surrounds, it's connected to it and surrounds the axial skeleton. So that's the easiest way to remember axial. Again, I don't use it too often, but nonetheless, there you go. The final plane is is a term you've heard before. You've heard of the abdominal oblique muscles because they're on the oblique angle. Okay, well, the oblique plane is just that. It's a plane that separates the body on an angle. So there you go. There are your 5 planes. And I tell you what, quick quiz. Sparky, you ready? Name me all 5 planes. Don't look. Starting with the first one we mentioned, go. Okay, now give me both for the second plane we mentioned. All right, and the third plane? Okay, and just give me 2 for the fourth plane we mentioned. It has 3 terms, but just use 2. Good. And the last one? That's right, it's the oblique plane. So there you go. As I said, we are going to have quizzes online and trivia questions if you want to go to the website, greglenko.com, just to test your knowledge, just for fun, or maybe seriousness. It's up to you. It's just a good way to get some extra study material in case you're studying anatomy or what have you. So tomorrow's lesson is going to be on directional terms. So until then, have a great night, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Well, I will, he won't.